As we often love to do on Thursdays, we want to take a look at some of the news that's been buzzing all over the week, and we want to bring in a couple of our FRC panel of pundits to help us with this. And of course, we always hit on the big news stories. But these days, there is so much other notable news items that are worthy of discussion, many of which often go under the radar. So here now to go over some of those items that they've been tracking is our panel for today, Mark Tapscott and Joshua Arnold, both with the Washington Stand. Mark, Joshua, thank you so much for joining me. Great to see you.
Great to be here.
Hi, Jody. Good to be here.
All right, Mark, let me start with you. Obamacare. It's been a hot topic on Capitol Hill this week. What's your take on the latest developments there?
I tell you, Congressman, there is so much that we could be saying about this particular issue. But something happened this afternoon in the White House that I think is tremendously significant. Dr. Oz announced that I think based on the initial assessments of the premium increases they're getting under Obamacare without the subsidies, it's only about 2.7%. And of course, you'll recall that the Democrats have been telling us for these many weeks now that if the subsidies aren't continued, people's premiums are going to explode. Well, maybe that's not the case. And if that is not the case, then the whole argument that the Democrats have been making for extending the subsidies is gone. And that could be hugely important. Hasn't gotten much coverage this afternoon.
Yeah, that's why we bring you on, because this is stuff that doesn't get much coverage. Joshua, this is such a big issue. I mean, the Democrats literally shut the government down over this issue. And now, not only are they not winning, they're actually losing now that the failures of Obamacare are getting so much attention. That's kind of what happens when you start shedding the light on something, isn't it?
I mean, that's what Ephesians 5 says. When anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. That's one thing we try to do here at the Washington Stand. There's a lot of news organizations out there that are just going to take, one side of the political aisle or the other. We try to present the news according to the truth, according to a biblical worldview, and present the facts as they actually are, so that people can make informed decisions about what's really going on. And as Mark just shared on this Obamacare thing, it seems like the Democratic talking points are not being borne out by reality.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just stick with you, Joshua, and change topics if I can, kind of shift gears a little bit. But there's some big news that's come out of Massachusetts regarding how foster parents provide care for foster children. I understand that this is especially good news for Christians. Can you update us on that?
That's right. So a while back, Massachusetts made a change to their requirements for what qualified a foster family. And one of the requirements was that the foster family had to affirm sexual orientation and gender identity of the child. Now, how many children are actually going to have a sexual orientation or a gender identity? That is not a question that concerned Massachusetts. But this affected some Christian families who felt strongly that they could not do this because of their conscience, because they held biblical views on marriage and sexuality. Some of those families were removed from the Massachusetts foster care system, which is a travesty because we've got such a shortage of foster care families. There's almost 2 kids for every 1 family willing to house them right now. So the Trump administration got involved. The Administration of Children and Families wrote to Massachusetts expressing concern over this. Alliance Defending Freedom filed a lawsuit on behalf of these families. And Massachusetts recently changed the language in that policy with an emergency rule change, weakening it a little bit so that parents now only have to support a child's individual identity. Both ADF and the Trump administration say this is a step in the right direction, but they're expressing caution that we're going to have to wait and see what exactly this means before we celebrate it as a full victory.
But a step in the right direction is a good step. Mark, what's your take on this story?
That's exactly right. This is an encouraging development. It's good to see the Massachusetts state bureaucracy responding, at least in somewhat the right direction. But like Joshua says, we've got to wait and see how this goes. And never forget the deep state bureaucracy here in Washington and in the state capitals. They're always looking for a way around doing what a biblical worldview would encourage being done.
Yep, good point. All right, Mark, let me stick with you and move yet again to another topic. I want to discuss the president's address last night. Of course, He spoke from the White House about the state of the economy, as well as how he anticipates things moving forward. What were some of the key takeaways for you?
Well, I have to say, at the 17th minute, when he actually stopped speaking, I felt like fainting because I had never heard him speak such a short time. I have to say, I was a little disappointed in some aspects of it because, Jody, you've been in politics a long time. You know that if you're having to explain, you're losing. And in a sense, the speech last night was devoted to explaining why people should not feel like, affordability is a problem. On the other hand, come January, when we start really seeing the effects of all of the One Big Beautiful Bill's tax provisions, for example, I think the narrative is going to shift, and it's going to become one of much more upbeat, much more positive. So it was a good speech. He spoke a little too loud. He spoke short, which was probably a good thing. And let's go have Christmas.
Yep. All right. Well, let me just kind of transition a little on that same topic, though, and Joshua, come over to you. There's a recent report that says inflation over the last 12 months is lower than normal. You, Joshua, are in a little bit different stage of life than some others of us. You and your wife are parents of young children, and you probably feel the pinch when the economy is a little more tight. But the president claims that things are picking up economically. So my question is this really being realized tangibly by most people, and specifically for those in a similar stage of life as you are?
Well, as you said, Jody, my wife and I have two sweet little boys, 3 and 1. We got a mortgage just before prices went up, so we're very lucky in that way, more than many other families out there as well. I would say for basically as long as we've had a family, all we've really known is rising prices. Inflation was so high in 2021 and 2022, and that really hurts families by increasing prices of not just food and gas, which can fluctuate around, but prices of everything. And what families are looking to see is something that brings those prices down. That's where the real affordability concern is not just that the prices stop going up, but that the prices actually come down. And we did have a good inflation report that showed inflation is not as high as it was, but it's still year over year at 2.7%. That's above the Fed's target of 2%. And it's still showing that prices are continuing slowly to climb. And that's a problem for the administration on affordability. They've got to show that they can bring prices down in some ways. I agree with Mark. I think that I've written about this before, that the Trump administration seems to be falling into the same error as the Biden administration of trying to claim economic success and explain to voters why what they're seeing about the economy is not accurate. What they need to do is take voters' concerns into consideration and take urgent action. They've got a year left before the midterms. Take urgent action to really get the economy moving again, to bring prices down. I hope that would look like maybe giving some tariff relief or the tax provisions that Mark mentioned. That's where the affordability concerns really are.
Yeah, I think if this economic issue is not addressed satisfactorily, it will have a massive impact on those midterm elections coming up next year for sure. Before we close out the program, Joshua, let me stick with you. I know you also wrote an article in the Washington Stand about the FBI raid that took place on President Trump's home, Mar-a-Lago. Okay, this is old news. We get it, but there seems to be some new information that we're just learning about this 3.5 years after the fact. What is some of that that's coming to light now?
it is old news. It's old bad news. The new information is almost like the waft of last week's cat poop drifting back over your yard once again. We're reminded just how political the Biden administration's conduct was. So the emails, internal emails from the FBI and DOJ were published by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they showed that the rank and file FBI members in the Washington field office conducting the operation at multiple points in June and July didn't think there was enough evidence to move forward with a search warrant or to move forward with a search warrant on everything, just on certain areas. They asked questions like, why are we still circulating this draft? We don't have any new evidence here. But the Biden administration politicals kept pushing for that search warrant. And as we know, eventually on August 8th, they decided to do a full-scale raid of President Trump's home.
That's frightening, how that all went down. It really is. Mark, some of these concerns that were actually raised beforehand, but they were dismissed by many in the government. They were dismissed by many in the media. They were called conspiracies. But now we have these new findings that are coming out, of course, as many people have a trust crisis, a trust problem with the government, as well as with the media, for that matter. Do you think this helps or adds to the distrust, what we're learning now?
Well, it certainly adds to the distrust, and especially when you ponder the fact that the only reason we know about these emails that Joshua was just describing is because Republicans in the Senate, led by the great senator from Iowa, just would not let go. They kept demanding that and getting finally the documents that included those emails. I can tell you, I have filed thousands of Freedom of Information Act requests with the government in my career, and getting email correspondence internal in the government is almost always impossible, and yet it's almost always where you're going to really begin to find what's going on in a particular issue. So this is Exhibit A on why freedom of information in the government and transparency in government and accountability are absolutely essential. Jesus said, darkness hates the light. Well, darkness really does, and that's why we need transparency.
Yeah, it goes back to what Joshua was mentioning earlier in Ephesians 5. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's where transparency occurs, where the light comes on. The darkness has to flee because it's exposed for what it really is. Let me ask you this, circle back around kind of where we started, Mark, and I'll throw this your way. And Joshua, if you want to reply, we've got less than 2 minutes to go. But this, the health care plan, health insurance plan, if this goes to the president's desk, is this going to empower people once again with
Absolutely.
their health insurance and so forth?
Absolutely. I'm doubtful that the House version that passed yesterday will make it through the Senate, but if it does, and President Trump signs it, as I suspect he will, it would be a giant step forward in terms of empowering individual consumers. That's the interesting thing about this whole Obamacare debate. The positions have reversed. It's the Republicans who are saying give the people more money and power, and it's the Democrats who are defending the establishment health care insurance companies. So, this one has turned the traditional political understanding of things on its head.
All right, Joshua, you get the final word. We've got about 30 seconds before we have to wind up.
I mean, I'm sure it couldn't be worse than Obamacare. You remember back at the beginning that President Obama said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. And that promise was broken from the very beginning. I don't ever remember a time before Obamacare. I went to college the year after it passed. And during the course of my 4 years in college, I had to change health care plans multiple times. It just doesn't work. It's not a workable system. So if we can give people better choices, I'm sure that will produce better outcomes.
Mark Tapscott, Joshua Arnold, both from the Washington Stand. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us on Washington Watch and for the incredible work that you do at the Washington Stand.